Cleveland. I get a physical every few years by the NFL for alumni, and it's like a 3-day deal. So Caserio was rude enough to go on without me today. I know that he addressed the rumors or speculation that perhaps he might leave after the season was over. I bear some responsibility in that. I think a lot of you know that, and it's not because I started anything, but I listened. And frankly, between it was Michael Lombardi and John McClain, who who said a few things and then shot himself down. So let's get it started. I've got the transcripts of the questions. I've got a spotty hotel internet connection here, so let me know if it's just an abject disaster, and I'll try something new later. But I do have the questions from the press, so since they notoriously are really hard to hear, I'll be able to augment that a little bit.
Exciting time for the organization, for the city, for a lot of people involved. I think we've had a fairly productive spring to this point. I think everybody's excited about the opportunity next week to add players to our team. I think before we move forward with anything, just a few thank yous I think are in order. Anytime you do something of this magnitude, there's a lot of people that are involved in that process along the way from the beginning. As far back as, let's call it, last August, last June, last May. And I think we've had a really, I would say, productive and collaborative effort this spring between the scouting staff and the coaching staff. Even with the changes that have taken place on the coaching front, we've had a really lot of constructive discussions with everybody involved. This process isn't about one person. It's not about one player. It's a collective effort. And that's our mindset organizationally. But specifically, just on the scouting side, and I think you all had an opportunity to hear from Lip, last week or a few weeks ago. But,
James Lipford, the director of personnel.
Really can't thank him enough for his effort and the way he organizes the group and the work and the time and the commitment that he puts in. But kind of going to go through these guys really individually. Just don't want to leave anybody out. But Lip, Tom Hayden, John Richards, Zeke Curtis, Bailey Brown, Blaze Taggart, George Panos, Najee Johnson, Brad Matthews. Those guys really put in more time than anybody.
Director of college scouting, Lipford is, and all those other guys, very important people.
Specific to the college scouting process, and they've enabled us to really get to this point. And then we have a number of folks in-house that are involved in the process as well, Nate and RJ. And then on the pro side, when we involve the pro scouts, and part of the pro scouting process is understanding the league, understanding maybe some of the needs and some of the direction where other teams are going to go. So we allocate time and resources in that group. Ronnie, DJ, Todd, Frank Edgerly, Rohit, Sam, Andrew Brown, who's involved in, I'd say, the visit process. Those people deserve as much credit, I'd say, as anybody in the building. So just think it's appropriate to acknowledge them as we work through this here.
They're so nice here.
In anticipation of what's going to happen next week.
So they bring me these NFL people bring me water like every 2 hours.
And then, before we take any questions, quite frankly, I'm almost embarrassed that I have to.
Okay, here it is. He's almost embarrassed that he has to address this.
Say anything. Honestly, I feel like Leonardo DiCaprio in The Wolf of Wall Street, but I'm not leaving. There's never really been any substantive discussions of the sort. Grateful and appreciative of the opportunity that my family and I have here in Houston. We understood when we arrived, when we got here, that there was a lot of work to be done. And I think when you look across the NFL landscape, there's work to be done in every organization. And I think we've made.
Okay. I just want to say a couple things here because and for those of you just joining us, I'm in a hotel because I'm getting a NFL alumni physical for 3 days here in Cleveland. I'm at the Cleveland Clinic in Cleveland, Ohio. So a couple things there. One was he said they've never had any substantive conversations. So I don't know if that excludes casual conversations about it. I'm also wondering, and I might have to do some digging with Sean Pendergast on this when we have Nick on Thursday. Nick's not a big movie guy. So somebody fed him that Wolf of Wall Street line. I'm not buying that, although he does have a finance background, so if he did have to see one movie, that might have been one of the ones that he saw.
Some progress. We still have a lot of work in front of us. Certainly, it's been a joy to work with D'Amico in concert as we build the team and continue to build the staff. Unfortunately, I think this time of year there's a lot of information and a lot of topics that are discussed. Some are more accurate than others, and I think it transcends multiple landscapes. But I can't. I'm honestly, I'm almost embarrassed that I have to say anything, but I feel like I have an obligation to to make that statement. Really try to stay ahead of it. I don't think there's anything else to talk about or to say or any question about it. Again, appreciative of the opportunity that we have here. Very grateful.
As far as him addressing the rumors that he was going to go, and to recap that for anybody that wasn't subjected to that, I don't know. I guess lunacy was Michael Lombardi, who'd worked with Nick Caserio, had speculated on his podcast, the GM Shuffle, that there would be some kind of shift in the Texans organization after the draft, and then John McClain came on our show and just had mentioned a kind of. John didn't mean it as a report. He just mentioned that somebody had circulated a rumor his way about Caserio possibly being gone or going back to New England. So from there, everything kind of lit up like wildfire, and Lombardi talked about it a little bit. So apparently that'll be the end of that talk until something else were to happen. And as far as addressing it, I guess it's kind of not to get overly political about it, but I guess it's not. I'm not going to get political about it all. But as far as like Obama's birth certificate, he didn't address it for years, and then finally he realized he had to address it. The same thing happened in Iraq when these people are trying to give me more stuff. And by the way, hey, listen, Arthur, it's the Intercontinental Cleveland, which is all like a Holiday Inn in Houston. But he about here, like if the Holiday Inn is nice enough, they call it an Intercontinental. And I got a meal allowance, and I haven't used it all yet the entire day.
My philosophy and goal is just try to do the best job that I can for the people in this organization, in this building, for the city. And as long as ownership approves of what we're trying to do, then, certainly their support is welcomed. So having said that, we'll take some questions here and go from there.
He said, "How important?" This is John McClain asking, "How important is it to get your quarterback issues solved?"
Yeah, I think there's a lot of different ways to go through the team. We'll look at everything. I think D'Amico made some comments. I want to say he spoke last Monday or something like that, and he was asking questions, but. We want to have a good football team. I think building a team is the most important thing. How that all comes together, there's always multiple moving parts. So we'll do whatever we think is best for our team and try to make good decisions. And the goal is to try to make good decisions over the course of time. So our next opportunity is Thursday night. So we'll continue the team building process and try to build on some of the things we've done here in the spring.
So if you couldn't hear that, she said, "I know you're obviously not going to tell us what position you're looking to draft or who you're going to draft, but are there a couple positions as you enter the draft where you're like, these are our biggest needs?"
Yeah, I think we've been pretty consistent, Christy, from the beginning. We just want to try to add good football players. If you look at where we are as a team here today, I think we have 69, 70 players that are on the team. So if we had to go out there and play a game today, I think we'd be able to field a team and put a team out there. We're always trying to add players throughout the course of the draft that, we think are going to help us in some capacity. I'd say some players are going to be more ready than others to participate. There's going to be competition regardless of who we draft. And those players are going to have to earn their role and find their niche on the team. So going back to what I said here a little bit earlier, we've had a lot of very constructive, substantive discussions with the coaching staff, with the offensive staff, with the defensive staff, factor in the kicking game. Spends time with the scouting staff and just try to identify, I would say, different pods and different, I would say, groups of players. And then you have to look at, where's the likelihood of us being able to add those players to the roster? And they're probably going to come at different points of the draft. I think one thing that I've learned in 23, whatever it is, years in the league is good football players can come in a lot of different areas, a lot of different parts of the draft. Matter of fact, I was reading an article the other day about the first round.
Okay, so real quick, as far as a couple things of what he said, the question was about which positions he or they might target. I think, and then he went on to talk about, where you can find different positions in the draft. Part of their offseason strategy, I know a lot of people don't like the fact that they were only taking 1 and 2 year contract guys in free agency, but as far as trying to get things established so they don't have to reach in the draft, center is still a position of need. They need a good young center, but those you can typically get in the second, third, fourth rounds and later. Off-ball linebacker, same thing. You should be able to find some quality guys in the second round and later. So they got some veterans there, and then they're passable veterans. They got a better quality of free agent on the offensive line, in the defensive backfield. I think that's where they're trying to cover their bases so they don't feel like they have to go for need, and they can actually allow these guys to develop a little bit. And now he's going to tell us about a book he read.
You start to look at even going back to 2020 and some of the fifth-year option and some of those, I would say, players. And, I mean, again, not that the draft is a coin flip, but, I mean, the draft's a coin flip. So I think our philosophy and goal is to try to make good decisions, try to get the right players with the right traits and characteristics, bring them into our building, assimilate them to our culture, and then let the competition kind of bear itself out in terms of who's going to play. And, we don't have to play a game until September. So we have a lot of work in front of us, and there'll be plenty of opportunities for plenty of players to prove that they've earned the role that they've deserved to have.
As far as the coin flip side of it, I don't know. People don't like hearing that, I think, because you want to believe that they love every guy that they draft. I think Nick takes a very analytical approach to it, in that you do look at, if you draft a quarterback in the first round, you got probably a less than 50% chance of even finding a guy who's a viable starter long term. So, and then when you get to different positions in other rounds, it's a coin flip. It's probability. It's not the juiciest way to talk about it, but Nick knows that he's not a juicy guy. This next question, let's see if we can hear it. We cannot hear that. All right, he says, you denied that report that you're leaving, but do you know where that kind of came from or originated from? This is a pretty brief answer he gives. It came from Michael Lombardi, and so let's see who he worked with and who he knows. So let's see if he says that directly. I doubt he does.
Again, you guys know more than I do. Again, I mean, my first inclination, people are reaching out to me last week, and I'm like literally laughing. So I can't speak for anybody else other than myself. So, I mean, again, like maybe you can do some digging on that. But, I mean, my focus is on the draft, is on the team, is on the people in this building, is on the coaching staff. And my responsibility is to the people that are here.
Yeah, so I don't know. You guys have had rumors. You guys have had rumors told about you before, right? You've lived your lives. You're no virgins. But sometimes the rumors are completely out of control. Okay, this is a rumor about me in high school once. Real quick aside, I gotta juice this up a little bit. When I was still a virgin, when I was in high school, there was a rumor about me that not only was I not a virgin, but that I was like the biggest male slut in the school, which I don't know how this comes to be, because it's not like women are out there, or maybe they were out there like lying about having slept with me, which would be a weird thing in high school to lie about, especially in the 90s. I think that, but I had a reputation as having been with like a boatload of girls, and that apparently my performances were legendary. And this is all like when I was a virgin, which made me petrified for like the first time I was going to do anything, that the expectations were going to be way too high. I feel like some woman put some like a false flag operation out there to get back at me. by just saying that I was incredible, knowing for damn sure that the first time wasn't going to be incredible for her. Okay, so this next question. Story time's over. My poor sister had to hear this rumor that they called me the 60-minute man. It's a virgin.
Yeah.
Okay, do you feel you have flexibility with the draft because of the free agents you've added? So that alluding to the point we had just talked about.
I think to your point, Aaron, I think we've created some optionality in multitude of ways. So, we're fairly well positioned. The first, I don't know, was it 4 or 5 picks in the first 75? Then we have a fourth. That pick at the top of the 4th round actually is a pretty valuable pick. So between that grouping of, I'd say, picks kind of where we're positioned, there probably will be some movement up or down throughout the course of the draft. So what we try to do in free agency is just add players that we feel are good football players that we think can help our football team in some capacity. That are the right players, that are the right fits for what we want to be and, how we want to play. So we really won't know the answer to the question about how that's all going to go. But I'd say right now we feel pretty good about where we are. And we just want to try to continue to add good players with the right traits and characteristics to the building and just try to build on some of the things that, we're trying to do.
Okay, so he said how we want to play. That's a big thing. And I've talked to people, and there's a whole lot of circulating rumors right now. One, that the Texans won't draft the quarterback at all. 2, that they're going to try to trade down. That they're actively trying to trade down. 3, there are conflicting reports. One, that Will Anderson is their favorite defensive player, where other people will say Tyree Wilson is their favorite defensive player. I personally think that because of the style of play, that Tyree Wilson is just like a big bullying type of dude that fits not just the San Francisco defensive line style, but everything that D'Amico has talked about since he's got here. Like D'Amico's like a Ronnie Lott type guy, where he's a complete Eagle Scout off the field, but on the field, go watch some, you youngsters out there, go watch some D'Amico Ryans highlights. He's just a scary individual, man. And now he couldn't be nicer. But when he wants guys that are going to play the way that he played. Let's see. So the next question here, if we can't hear it, I'll read along, and I'll try to add more verve to it. When you look at positional value in this year's draft, you see a surplus of talent start at one position, maybe less at another position. Does that factor into your draft process and the selection process, whether you move up or down? I'm going to predict that he doesn't actually think that you can say for sure if it's a surplus. It just might seem like that.
Does that factor into your draft process and the selection process of where you move up and down?
Yeah, there's a certain strategy that's going to be involved. You could have a certain number of players graded. Maybe they're closely graded, but they might not be closely graded based on the role, based on their value. So draft's about supply and demand. Picks are about supply and demand. Trades are about supply and demand. So how you position yourself accordingly is based on where the optionality you feel is. So if you pick the player at a certain level, can you get an equivalent player at a later point? If you can, where's kind of that breaking point? So therefore, how do you position yourself?
So last year, the classic is Kenyon Green. The Texans trade back 3 spots. And the thinking, because Nick thinks of these bands of players, which is that, okay, you got there's some guys here that are all about the same. You got some guys here. So what he was thinking is, okay, we can trade back, and, that basically Kyle Hamilton and the defensive line, Jordan Davis and Kenyon Green must have all been about the same band. So at the time, they didn't think it was a big deal that they missed out on those other 2 guys. If Kenyon Green doesn't get it going this year, where Kyle Hamilton ended up having a good year after a slow start, and Jordan Davis was mixed bag, but showed a lot of promise. Those 3 guys are kind of in competition right now to prove Nick right or wrong. I'm holding out that Kenyon was just injured.
Yourself accordingly. So I'd say it's certainly going to be relevance relative to some of those positions. So we'll go through kind of draft strategies, go through draft scenarios. If we pick here, all right, here's our choices. If we move on from this pick, where can we pick up another player? What's the recourse there? So we're actually having those discussions, not daily, but, kind of every couple days, just sort of recalibrating based on some of the information. We might get some new information. Say we're finishing up our draft visits here this week. Those have been very productive, I would say. We actually started them a week after the combine, so we try to get ahead of that process here a little bit in March. So I think we brought in maybe 8 to 10 players kind of in March after the draft, so we weren't too hard-pressed to try to race to the end. Maybe you lose out on a player that you really want to have in the building. So I would say that process has been a very productive process in terms of bringing the players in the building. Say, not to go behind a curtain a little bit, but what we try to do with that is simulate as best we can what a day is going to entail for that player. So from the time they come in the building, it's 6:30, 7 o'clock. From the time that they leave at 4 o'clock, it's coaching staff, it's strength and conditioning, it's player development, it's scouting, it's all the different people that are going to touch them in the football operation, try to give them a picture of what we're trying to create. And we've gotten a lot of constructive feedback from that process. So in the end, we're just trying to put ourselves in the position to make good, sound decisions with the right people and the right players. And hopefully it gets to an end point that we can all be proud of and, happy about come draft weekend.
So when he's talking about the visits, for one, that is like as a player, that is a long day. I know that doesn't sound like an incredibly long day, but it's just that the eyeballs are on you the entire time. I thought the visit, like a visit to a team, including as a free agent, like after I'd been in the league a long time, I felt that was more stressful than the combine itself. Because the combine, like you're going in, you're meeting people, you're talking to them for 5, 10, 15 minutes, but you're not like in one spot where the microscope is on you the entire time. The other point, as far as Double Cross Swine said, and Nick talking about some of their simulations and everything that they've done. Yeah, if they're shopping this pick, which he talks about, I believe in this from the headlines I've seen, if they traded down and then Bryce Young didn't go, I guess you'd have to hope for your own sanity's sake that for whatever reason the Texans didn't like Bryce Young that much. We can talk about the whole CJ Stroud conversation going on right now. Peter King said a few things about teams potentially not being that interested in him, but a lot of things circulating right now. Why does it feel so much more stressful than last year? I guess because last year there wasn't a quarterback to be had, so that just makes all the difference in the world.
Nick, you've been around this process for a very long time as far as the draft is concerned. And the last time we spoke to you, there was a team that wasn't so much in need of a position like you all are, or maybe looking at.
Okay, so he says when you're looking at the quarterback, wait a second. Let me be sure this is what he's saying.
As far as quarterback is concerned, what's behind you? When a team like Carolina jumps up and trades and jumps up.
Okay, he had a long preamble there. When a team like Carolina jumps up and trades and jumps above you, does that change your draft board? Does that make you change some of your draft strategy?
Change some of your draft strategy if they go and pick the players, say, that you had on your board first?
Yeah, we really can't control what other teams do. I mean, every team is going to do what they think is best. So our job is to understand the players, understand the board, try to make good decisions, and we pick wherever we pick. So we pick at 2, we pick at 2. If we don't pick at 2 and we pick somewhere else, then we just have to be prepared to pick accordingly. So we can't control what other teams do. Try to do our homework and then just try to make the right decisions and the best decision for our team.
As far as because now it's getting. I get so tired of seeing every damn week somebody have the revelation that the Texans could have had the number 1 overall pick. It's vexing to me. And I've seen people ask, hey, why didn't the Texans try to trade up to number 1 more aggressively? This is what I think you need to remember, is that it was the Carolina Panthers that traded super aggressively to get up to number 1 overall. And they have a history of being very, very overly aggressive, I'd say. And as much as people like Bryce Young and he's becoming the consensus number 1 overall pick, I've seen enough people say that other teams like CJ Stroud better, but that's all people say things. It's that the fact of the matter is the Texans might not think that either of these guys genuinely hung the moon. They might really like Bryce Young. Maybe they like him more than CJ Stroud. But it could be that they just aren't that impressed, or at least they're nervous about Bryce Young's size. I feel like everybody's afraid to say that they're nervous about Bryce Young's size on the NFL side. James Palmer said it's only the old guys that are saying it, but it's almost out of like it's out of a desire to not sound like a dinosaur. You gotta, if you're in these hip analytical circles that Nick is in, you don't want to come off acting like you're just appealing to tradition and saying like, well, size can't be a factor, because that's just what old people think. I think there might be more to it.
Nick, when you're looking at this quarterback situation with D'Amico and Bobby coming in, the various quarterbacks they've had, the success they've had in San Francisco, what have you learned from them, and are you viewing?
Yeah, I'm gonna have to transcribe that one too. Let's see. This question was when you're looking at the quarterback situation with D'Amico and Bobby Slowick coming in, the various quarterbacks they've had, the success they've had in San Francisco, what have you learned from them? And are you viewing the position a little differently now than maybe you were when they came in the building?
Differently now than maybe before they came in the building?
Yeah, I'd say there's a lot of carryover. I mean, in terms of like what's important at the quarterback position, I'd say in those conversations, I think we're in agreement on a lot of those qualities. Ultimately, it comes down to how your team plays on Sunday. So in the end, it's going to be a collective effort, how we play offensively, how we play situationally on both sides of the ball, how we play in a kicking game. So that doesn't necessarily change. Are there things that maybe are not more important, but hey, maybe this is something that we look for, or we put a little bit more emphasis on this? Okay, you take that into consideration. But ultimately, we're going to try to make the best decision for our team that makes the most sense for everybody involved. So our job, part of my job, is to take in as much information as possible and to take in input from as many people as possible. And again, we've had a lot of very constructive and collaborative discussions across the organization, both offensively and defensively, and then with Frank's input in the kicking game as well. So in the end, it all has to fit together. The number one job of, I would say, a team, and it's about scoring one more point than the other team. So how do we get to that point is about how you play on Sunday. How you play on Sunday is a product of how you handle situational football. How you handle situational football is a product of who is on your team, and do the players that are on the field understand what's important. So regardless of the team.
I'm going to have to do a flow chart of that last thing he just said. If A, then B, then C, then D.
Regardless of who's coaching, those aren't going to change. Philosophically, how you get to that end point could be a little bit different. Each team is going to approach it a little bit differently. So I'd say from that perspective, honestly, it's been kind of, refreshing just to kind of hear just another viewpoint, another perspective. And in the end, we have to mesh it all together. And ultimately, we're making a decision for the Houston Texans, not for one individual person.
So the original question was whether Bobby Slowick and D'Amico Ryan's experience has changed the way he feels about the quarterback at all or anything. And I think that as far as what that scheme is all about, compared to what Caserio had in New England, there's much more of an actual scheme and system with Coop Shanistan. And, there's certain concepts and everything that New England has done over the years, or that they did with Tom Brady, but it was much more malleable, and it was much more week to week, where, there's two extremes of the spectrum. There's like a game plan offense over here, that's Tom Brady and the Patriots. And then there's a repetition-based offense over here. That's Gary Kubiak, that's Kyle Shanahan, where in a rep-based scheme, you're going to be running a lot of the same plays over and over, and they've gotten more complex over the years. It's not the same way it was in the 90s or anything, or even with Kubiak, when Kubiak first got to Houston. But it's there's not as much variation from week to week, so I think that part would be different for Nick. And I wonder if being a good quarterback is being a good quarterback, but there might be some elements that the 49ers guys are willing to overlook that maybe Nick isn't, because Nick's got that template in his brain of basically what a Tom Brady is. And not that he's that rigid thinking about it, but that's what he's seen compared to what the Coop Shanistani guys have seen. Oh, and as far as the Stroud hate coming from his testing, I think double cross swine is probably referring to the S2 cognitive test. We've talked about that some. It's a new visual cognition test where it tests people and how fast they recognize objects that are like flashed at subliminal speeds, how they can track moving objects. There's a really strong correlation between good quarterbacks, good safeties, good defensive backs, wide receivers, the guys for whom either tracking visual objects or hand-eye coordination and throwing and catching a football are really important. Those guys that don't score well in that don't tend to do well on the football field, at least at the quarterback position. I'm going to be honest with you. A lot of the information that's come out about it has either been leaked by agents of guys who scored well on it or the guys who invented the test themselves. I wish there were a little bit more transparency, because right now it's kind of like when you hear about anything new technologically the first time. It's like hearing Steve Jobs tell you about something that Apple's putting out. You're going to hear the best parts of it.
Nick, now that you worked with D'Amico for a while.
Oh, and the rumors are that Stroud didn't do that well on it. And I haven't seen any, even when people leak that, they're kind of like, well, I hear that he didn't do that well. So like, how bad is not that well? I have no idea, other than that Bryce Young scored really, really well.
How do you feel like you guys are aligned when it comes to addressing the quarterback position? I mean, I think, whatever, 90% of people believe you'll find your quarterback in this draft. We're not in those rooms. We're not in your guys' heads. What's your guys' alignment going into this draft of how you find your next franchise quarterback?
So that sounded like Brian T. Smith. I think most of you could probably hear that, but just in case. Nick, now that you've worked with D'Amico for a while, how do you feel like you guys are aligned when it comes to addressing the quarterback position? I think 90% of people believe you'll find your quarterback in this draft. We're not in those groups. We're not in your head. What's your alignment going into this draft about how you'll find your next franchise quarterback? Hold on. Yeah, come in. Oh, I'm going to play Nick here for a second.
Yeah, I don't want to speak for him. He's probably listening anyways. But I think we have a lot in common in terms of how we view players, how we see a football team, the things that we deem important. And I don't want to say we talk daily, but we talk daily just about on all.
My neighbor is complaining because of my loud voice. Son of a bitch. They can't hold us down.
All those matters. And, again, I've really enjoyed my time with him in a short period of time. I can't speak highly enough of him as a person, as a football coach, his perspective, his viewpoint, kind of what he brings to the table. I think he has solidified what we thought going through the hiring process. And, we're excited to try to build this together. And just try to build a good, solid, sound football team that plays well situationally, that I would say the organization, and the city can be proud of. Is that easy? No. Is there one way to do it? Absolutely not. We've both had the good fortune of being in good programs and being a part of good teams, understanding what good football looks like. So how do we kind of put our stamp on the Houston Texans 2023? In the end, that's the goal, and that's the most important thing.
Nick, obviously every year is different, but in the last few years, when you look back at the draft process, how have you evolved or changed the process for yourself in this group?
So she asked, how have you evolved or changed the process?
Yeah, Deep, it's a great question. We've kind of looked at, I would say, everything, on a yearly basis. So whether it's a draft process, is there something maybe we can do a little bit different? Which we've done that this year. Just alluded to a little bit earlier, kind of the process of the onboarding of the players from the visits, and then what we do post-visit, how we consume that information, how we accumulate that information, how we apply that information, or whether it's including a different viewpoint or a different angle, or it's a different tool maybe that we didn't have previously that maybe we've outsourced to try to get maybe a secondhand view. So whatever we feel we can do to improve what we're doing, that's what we're going to try to do. And I think we have a responsibility to each other to do that, I would say, fairly consistently, whether it's pre-draft process, how we train players, the resources that we provide to the players. So we're constantly looking at everything to try to improve, with the end goal of doing what's best for the organization and also prioritizing what's most important for the players. Are we providing the players the requisite resources available to them so that they can be as successful as possible? So I think we're trying to do that. We've made, I would say, considerable effort in that regard. I know it's secondhand, but in the spring, I'd say some of the commentary from the NFLPA, from the players about some of the things that are going on in the building, I think that's a reflection of the people that are in the building, and just always trying to do things in a positive, professional way that serves the players in the best capacity possible. So to answer your question, we've definitely looked at some different, not that we've completely modified the process, but we've incorporated some things to hopefully enhance what we're doing to arrive at a good endpoint.
So as far as that NFLPA study, I feel bad. So I'm at the Cleveland Clinic, and this is the hotel attached to the Cleveland Clinic. So like when people have do not disturbs on, it's because they might be actually like very sick, and I'm facing the wall. So I feel very guilty, very. There we go. Okay. So I'm at the Cleveland Clinic, and the person next to me was apparently complained because they might be sick. They've got their do not disturb on, so I'm trying to be quiet now. As far as the different tools that they use, I think that the S2 cognition test might have been where the person who asked that question, I don't know if that was DP Sadu, was headed with that. But I think Nick has always been pretty advanced with that kind of stuff. And honestly, Jack Easterby got a lot of that stuff going, a lot of those sub programs they talk about. So I do hope that some of the things that Jack Easterby brought to the table, like 33% of it, you could discard the 67%, but 33% of it was pretty good. And I think that they're going to, they're gonna keep it going. Magnificent Merker, I'm telling you, that person might be very sick. It's the Cleveland Clinic. Okay, this question.
You've spoken to this a little bit already, but last year you guys picked at 3, or slated to pick at 3 originally, and you picked at 3. But before the draft, when you talked to us, you were pretty open about being open for business with the number 3 pick last year. So I asked you this year.
Okay, so he said last year you were pretty open about being open for business with the number 3 pick.
Brandon, we've received some calls actually on the number 2 pick. So I think our job and responsibility is to listen, not rule anything out. And I think whatever the end result is, come Thursday, we'll be prepared to go either way. So if you want to quote me, are we open for business? I'd say we're open to listening. So if you want to change the vocabulary this year a little bit, but we have received a few calls. And again, I think our responsibility is to listen, to try to take the information in and then just make the right decision.
Okay, so a lot of people have brought up this good point, and I'm going to move even further away from my potentially very ill neighbor. So I came up here during the pandemic, like in 2020 was the first time I did this physical that the NFL did. And back then, like it was like during complete shutdown, and we're at the Cleveland Clinic, and like people come here from all over. Obviously, it's kind of like the Houston Medical Center, so that was kind of weird. So it's a bit more normal this time, but I am still next to potentially sick people. So let me get my phone.
There you are.
So I know that you've done this, you've been in the league for 23 years, and this is about a team, not just about you. But with this being your third year in this particular role, can you talk about just what you've learned over your 2 years?
Okay, so she's asking, so I know you've done this, you've been in the league for 23 years. This is about a team, not just you. With this being your third year in this particular role, can you talk about just what you have learned over your 2 years? What may be different about you as you approach this?
Yeah, the league's hard. There's never, I would say, one way to do it. And I think, look, we're all grateful to be in the position that we're in. Each year, there's going to be challenges that teams face. So I think what we want to try to do is just try to, as best we can, try to make good, sound, smart decisions. And if you do that over the course of time repetitively, I think that enables you to have the most long-term success organizationally. So we have a lot of work in front of us, but always invigorated by, I would say, the off season, because essentially everybody's kind of starting over, regardless of what happened the previous year, regardless of what the end result is, whether you're Kansas City or you're the Houston Texans. So I'm not saying we're like the Kansas City Chiefs. Like, believe me, that's not what I'm saying. I don't want anybody to write that and then interpret what I'm saying.
Screw the Chiefs, Nick.
But
we're better than the Chiefs.
I think, you always have to, I'd say, have an open mind, be grateful, be humble, and understand that you don't have all the answers. And it takes I would say, a team effort. And again, that's why I think we've emphasized sort of the team approach. D'Amico's talked about that. We've talked about that. I've talked about that. D'Amico's talked about, the swarm mentality. I think that's a pervasive attitude and mindset that we want to, I would say, transcend the organization. So, people that have a special work ethic and relentless mindset, our responsibility and job is to find those players and find those people. And
the swarm mentality, special work ethic, and relentless mindset. All right, I got to learn this by training camp, or coach is going to be mad at me.
We do that, and with enough people, then hopefully we put ourselves in a position to have some modicum of success. It doesn't guarantee success. Nothing's guaranteed. Like, we're not guaranteed tomorrow. So I think it's just try to come in, try to have the right mindset, try to have the right attitude on a day-to-day basis, try to make good, sound decisions, understand you can't control. There's only so many things you can control, which, again, like, I'm sort of first-hand example of that, having to answer a question about something that's out of my control. So, just try to enjoy the process, understand that, nothing's guaranteed. Again, when you look at some of the things that are going on societally, it kind of puts things in perspective. Again, you have to read, Sunday morning about another mass shooting that's taken place in our country. So, when you just put it in perspective of football, I'd say it kind of shows you, it kind of pales in comparison. So I think you always have to be curious. You always have to be open to learning. You always have to be open to maybe doing things a little bit differently. If you think it's going to enhance the overall performance of your program and team, then we have a responsibility to do that. Hopefully that I've tried to do that and will continue to do that as long as I'm here.
Yeah, and I think that the ability to change and the adaptability is something that he stresses a lot. And and it's funny because whenever he talks about it in the New England context, he never wants to go into it too much, because a lot of it has to do with, like, oh yeah, when you find out that your tight end turns out as a mass murderer, or that you may have been illegally deflating footballs. Like, you got to kind of pivot off of that stuff. As far as the one question, and for those of you just joining us, I'm whispering because I'm up at the Cleveland Clinic getting a 3-day physical that the NFL offers to retired veteran players. But the neighbors complained, and for me and my loud voice, and sometimes I worry that even my whisper is actually kind of loud. So if we get another one, I'll have to shut this thing down. Or I'll just take it out in the hallway. We'll take it to the streets. Hey, Seth, Caserio loves SEC guys, and Coach D'Amico is Mr. Bama. Do you think players from Alabama will want to play for the Texans now? I found myself, as far as they want to, I don't think so. The guys want to go where they want to go. Money. But it was funny because I was looking at Will Anderson and I was thinking about like, he's not that, he's only 240 pounds. He's not that big. Is that the kind of guy that D'Amico wants? But then you go back and think of Alabama linebackers that played defensive end, like, oh yeah, Derek Thomas. Derek Thomas was all right. So I went down a Derek Thomas wormhole the other day. He was plenty big. Oh, okay. Another question. I will read this one for you. Let's see. Anything different about you, though? What have you learned in 2 years? So she had asked the question about, she had asked that question, but he kind of deferred to everybody else. So she wants to know specifically about him.
Have to rely on the people around you and take information and utilize the right information and the right inputs, and really trust the information that you have, that if it kind of tells you one thing, probably should lead you towards that direction. You never second guess. I think you always want to try to learn, you know what, hey, okay, we made this decision. Here's what went into that decision. Here are the inputs. Okay, you know what, feel good about it, or feel comfortable, or you know what, maybe we should have trusted something else or sort of utilized maybe something a little bit differently. So there's no right or wrong formula. There's no perfect formula. I think you just have to be open to learning, and just try to get better each and every day.
Okay. As far as the 60-Minute Man high school story, because somebody had said I was flexing on that one. It was a completely fictitious story. It was almost the exact opposite of what would eventually become the truth. As far as F the neighbors, Laro, I told you they could be very sick people. We're at the Cleveland Clinic. I don't want to do that. There's old people here. Here we go.
There's been a lot of talk about the S2 test when it comes to quarterback evaluation. So what specifically is in that test and how does it help?
Okay, so he is asking, there's been a lot of talk about the S2 test when it comes to quarterback evaluation. What specifically is in that test and how does it help the evaluation process with scouting quarterbacks?
Yeah, I would say each team has different tools that they utilize. Candidly, like, I don't want to speak on something that I'm not familiar with. We're aware of it. I think we have some other tools and resources that we utilize. So, I don't want to really speak on something that I don't really have firsthand knowledge. I don't think it's fair to anybody involved. So I respect the question, but, I think we have other tools and resources that we try to utilize as a part of our process.
Whoa. Oh, you slept on me, you sons of bitches, because I was getting these physicals all day today. And I saw one of you up there say that he didn't know about the S2 test. But San Francisco uses that supposedly or trusts in it a lot. So the S2 test that we were talking about, I'm surprised that they don't use it. Unless that's just some way to try to get smoke away from them not liking CJ Stroud, to try to create the illusion that they might take CJ Stroud. I don't know.
Over the last couple of years, there's been a lot of change at the college level, things getting thrown at some of these top prospects that kind of build them up, NIL, all that sort of stuff.
Okay, so this new environment in the hotel room has gotten me all kinds of messed up. Let's see. So we had the S2 test. I want to be sure you guys hear these questions. Okay, last couple of years, there's been a lot of changes at the college level, things getting thrown at some of these top prospects, build them up, NIL. Have you gotten a gauge of what it's been like as that process has developed and the maturation of some of the guys coming in and understanding maybe a little bit more what they're walking into, that kind of interaction?
What have those interactions been like as that process over there has developed and the maturation of some of these guys coming in and understanding maybe a little bit more what they're walking into and that kind of interaction between them and the player?
It's a great question. I think you kind of have to separate some of the things that they went through in college, because you're not necessarily reduplicating the whole NIL process. I think there's maybe a professional element and that's involved, and they maybe understand that side of it. That's an aspect of it. But I think the focus for the players, especially rookies, is your job is to be the best football player that you can be. So what can you do in those areas? Your focus is on, I would say, your nutrition, your conditioning, your recovery, your sleep, your schematic understanding of what you're doing, what the other team is doing. And regardless of who we draft, regardless of their experience at the NAIA level, and some have more experience than others, they're essentially starting over. They're starting from scratch. And I think one of the things that's been interesting in visiting with some of these players in the building is we've actually taught them some things and talked to them about some things on tape, whether it's a technique or skill or an area they can improve. And the feedback has been positive because a lot of them said, quite frankly, Coach, like, we've never heard that, or I've never heard that. So it's something that could actually help them as a player. So this isn't an indictment about anything that goes on in college, because I think the college rules are they have 20 hours. I think the focus is more on maybe certain things relative to others. Well, our job is to be as granular as possible.
I got it. I'm going to say this out loud so I might remember after he's done talking, like 7 minutes from now. Kyle Allen and Jordan Palmer have a podcast together, and they talk to Will Levis in it. And it's really interesting. I might have to pull that up after we're done here. But just what Nick is talking about there, guys learning things that they'd never learned before. I've always been surprised. Some of these quarterbacks, when they're talking to guys, I'm surprised by some of the little things they don't know, like things that I even knew as a defensive lineman that they don't know, despite having gone to all these fancy quarterback academies and having had all the best tutelage and everything. It's surprising to me, but it's true. There's limited time and resources in college
because our players are in the building 6:30 until 4:30, 5 o'clock during the course of a day during the regular season. So there's ample amount of time for you to work on your skill and to work on things that are going to make you a better player. So the more resources we provide them, the more feedback we provide them in those areas, that's how they're going to become a better player. And marketing and everything else that comes along with being in the NFL, that's a result of being a good football player. So if you focus on being a good football player first, then the residual effect will be some of those other areas down the road. So I think it's more of probably an awareness more than anything else, but you're not necessarily reduplicating what happened last year or the year before, because they're going into a new situation and a totally new environment.
Yeah, as far as the S2, the NIL stuff, so many damn acronyms. I was impressed by CJ Stroud when he was on the Pivot talking about that, and how at one point he told David Mulligetta, his agent, which is a whole nother issue we can get into, but told his guys, like, hey, let's back off on the NIL stuff. I just want to focus on football. And I think that part of it, those guys, the quarterbacks especially, some of them have had to deal more with that as college athletes than they will in their rookie year, because a lot of teams just don't want their rookies doing much of anything at all, so they can focus in a lot more. I'll read this question. So John McClain, in case you couldn't hear it, asked, Nick, is it possible you guys can come out of this draft without a quarterback?
I mean, anything's possible. I think it's what's possible, and what the hope is that we can come out of this draft with good football players that we think can help our football team. And that's what we're focused on doing.
Yeah. So, yeah, that was a good question. I guess that, yeah, it's possible. I mean, for Nick to say anything other than the answer he gave right there would be the dumbest thing a GM's ever done, especially if they are actively trying to trade out of the second round. Sauce should be on this team, for God's sake. Fire Nick, rip the bandage off. The thing is, like, with D'Amico this year, he should get opportunities to play more like Sauce Gardner did last year, where they'll challenge him. They'll play, cover three, but where it's like it's man, you're playing inside out, and you're playing zone to man on that. And I think they'll challenge Sauce Gardner. if D'Amico does anything the way Robert Saleh did. And also D'Amico is pretty, like D'Amico played a lot of cover 2 last year. Brett Coleman talked about this the other day on the Texans Fan Battle podcast, but he's going to do whatever he needs to do. He hasn't had a great cornerback play in San Francisco. So if he can get something out of Stingley, then, and Steven Nelson, like he could, if Stingley can be close to what we were hoping he would be, they could have actually better cornerback play this year in Houston than they did in San Francisco last year, which is encouraging.
Oh, there.
Similar to that question, if you guys do pass up an opportunity to draft a quarterback, what would be the plan moving forward? Would it be to stick with Davis Mills, or would
So he's asking, if you guys do pass up an opportunity to draft a quarterback, what would be the plan moving forward? Stick with Davis Mills or address or trade or free agency?
it be to address it rather trade or free agency?
Yeah, I think we've been consistent and take it one day at a time. We'll look at our options and what those entail. We won't eliminate anything and just try to make good decisions. So, I mean, that's really the decision-making, matrix and process that we're going to go through, that we go through today, we're going to go through tomorrow, that will go through next Thursday, that will go through Friday, that will go through in the spring, in May, June, when we go to September, and then, we'll be ready to play whatever day we're going to play, whoever we're going to play the opening game.
We're going to close with
Jonathan, there we go.
Okay, he's saying, I'm curious, after the tape and after you watch the tape and film, you see what they're possibly capable of. What types of things in that interview process? So what types of things in that interview process may turn you on or off about a player?
Say there's nothing in particular. What you're trying to do is get an overall feel of the player. Does the information that you have accumulated to this point consistent with your overall experience, interaction with that player in the building? So do they take coaching? Are they receptive to coaching? What's their background? What have they been coached to do? What have they been told to do? Because when we're independently watching the player play, talking specifically about what they're doing on the field, sometimes you really don't know. You think you might know, but it's not real clear. So you go through their scheme, kind of get their perspective on it. We teach them our information. How do they retain our information? Can they retain our information? Can they apply what we're telling them? Can they take a training technique or something that we're providing them? They understand the importance of it. So what you're trying to do is just get an overall feel for the person on a day-to-day basis. So when they walk in the building, whenever you draft a player or you sign a player, you get everything that comes along with them. So there could be a certain picture.
As far as what you're saying with, asking them what happened on specific plays, that's huge with quarterbacks. It's funny, when I watch Will Levis, I've gone out and I've found a bunch of different clips of NFL quarterbacks, including that one with Jordan Palmer and Kyle Allen. But guys kind of watching the Will Levis film, and they never want to outright criticize him because they don't know exactly what the read is or what the offense is, but they keep asking, like, why is he looking here? Like, I don't understand why he's looking here instead of here. Those are the questions that they really want to ask, like on a nuts and bolts thing. They're not just trying to assess personality or anything, because that can be hard to do in an interview environment, but they just really want to know, okay, what are you thinking? Like when I was watching Will Anderson, there's times where, like, I don't think Will Anderson diagnoses plays as well as Tyree Wilson, which is important if you want to play Will Anderson off the ball at all, and I don't think he's as particularly athletic in space either, at least the way people had advertised Will Anderson. But I don't know for sure because I don't know exactly what his keys are. There's times where I think that he's making the wrong run read, but his responsibilities might just be different than it appears to me. So like those are the kinds of things they want to talk to these guys about.
Sure, painted of a player, but the perception, reality, might be different. So our job is to say, all right, in the end, where's the truth? What's the right answer? And what we try to emphasize is let's just get it right. Let's be right with what we think the player is, have conviction, And then when the player is here, it either refutes or confirms it, and then taking the opportunity, kind of going back to Kim's question a little bit earlier, let's learn from it, good or bad, so that the next time something like this comes up, we try to make the right decision. So I would say our pre-draft process is maybe different than some other teams. Doesn't mean one's better. It just means we feel this is the best thing for us. And, I'd say they've been very, very productive. And I'd say in some respects at times we've eliminated players because it kind of confirms maybe some of the things that we thought initially, or, you know what, there was some question marks going in, but at different checkpoints, like we have a different view, or, you know what, in the end, we respect that, but we're going to go with this information and go with this, I would say, final analysis. So,
that's interesting, because sometimes you look at the guys they're bringing in and you think, oh, they must be interested in these guys, obviously. But some of them that might, like, they're bringing these guys in basically to put the final nail in their coffin. Like if they hear bad character things about a guy and then that guy comes in and doesn't do anything to, like, if you've got character questions and you come in and you can't somehow put a dent in that, like that's some out of touch BS, man. Like, you got to that's a guy that's just not going to be able to figure it out. I worry about those guys in life in general.
There's an ebb and flow to it. And again, there's no exact science to this. Like, there's no do this is the end result. If they're that easy, I mean, I think a lot of people would do it. So it's hard to run an NFL team. It's hard to run a draft. There's no perfect formula. So, again, we just try to make good, solid, sound decisions over the course of time. I mean, that's really the goal.
Okay, so there's 2 more questions here, and then I've got some Peter King tidbits from Football Morning in America. And for those of you just joining us, I'm at the Cleveland Clinic. I've had a noise complaint from my neighbors because I'm up here doing a 3-day physical that the NFL does for retired players. But I'm worried that my neighbor might be a sick person who I'm disturbing, and they need their sleep. That's why I'm whispering. You guys know I have a hard time speaking quietly. Okay, so this person is asking, how do you balance the talent with the availability factor in the draft in regards to medical? Says something about how they might not be available for a while.
I think you kind of hit the nail on the head, Aaron. So medical is a component, but then you have to look at the actual analysis of the medical. What does the information tell you? What is their availability? Are they going to be ready to go? Is this a chronic condition? Is this something that can be exacerbated or get worse? And then based on that information, then you weigh the risk reward of where you have to draft the player, the resource allocation involved. Because in the end, you're making financial decisions as well. So you want to try to make good, sound financial decisions where appropriate. Not that you're letting that drive your decision-making mechanism, but you certainly have to factor it in, which is why you have that medical meeting, so we have an understanding of, what the picture of the player is in that particular area.
Okay, so now that's another one, Tyree Wilson, because I like Tyree Wilson. And it's weird because, you get into these conversations about, okay, do you like Tyree Wilson or Will Anderson? They're both really good. But I think Tyree Wilson just has a freak factor to him that I want to see, that he's just so long and he makes plays with his length. There's some things about Anderson's athleticism and speed where I just don't think it's not elite NFL speed. And a lot of times the things you see him do in college, it doesn't look as obviously translatable to the NFL. Whereas Tyree Wilson does some things that, for one, the length is the length, and he has strong, powerful hands. Like, there are things that Tyree Wilson does right now that will translate day one in the NFL. One of the things he doesn't do well is he doesn't get off the ball very quickly. That's another thing that I think that conversations with the team are important, because sometimes, like, as a defensive lineman, sometimes guys are just, if they're focused on their responsibilities, their gap control responsibilities, you've got your eyes on the offensive lineman instead on the football. In a pass rush situation in the NFL, the good pass rushers got their eyes on the ball, and they are just, attached to it with a string. When the ball's going, they're gone. I haven't seen anything from Tyree Wilson that would suggest he's got like poor reaction time or something that's going to prevent him from being quicker off the ball. I think it's just a guy that plays, and they play a 3-man front sometimes. So he's playing like a read and react defensive end. And in those instances, he's slow off the ball. If anything, he just needs to learn to be a little greedier. Like a lot of the great pass rushers, they know when to be greedy. You just go. So off on a tangent, off of his tangent of the tangent. Last question. One last quarterback question. If you guys don't do anything before next season,
If you guys don't do anything before next season to upgrade the quarterback position, do you believe that this team can be successful?
if you don't do anything to upgrade the quarterback position, do you believe this team can be successful?
It doesn't really matter what I think or believe. I think in the end, it's about the players. This is a players' league, and it's going to be about the players' performance, on Sunday, and what they do with their opportunities. So, I think we're excited about, where we are as a team. We certainly have a long way to go. I think the attitude and the effort of the players, it's early in the off season, but, we have, I don't want to say just about everybody in the building, but we have just about everybody in the building that's here training. So I think it speaks to the players, their commitment to what we're trying to do, their commitment to winning, their commitment to getting better, their commitment to the coaching staff. I'd say it's a reflection of, D'Amico and the coaching staff. It's a reflection of the people in the building. So I think that's what we're focused on more than anything else. And whenever we play our first game, whoever that's against, with whatever players are here, hopefully we'll be ready to go and go out there and play good football. All right. Thank you.
And Tyree Wilson, the other thing about him is he's got that foot injury. So that's the big question with him right now is what the hell's going on with his foot. So I am here at the Intercontinental Hotel at the Cleveland Clinic. Here, let me go. I'm going to bring up this next
Thanks,
question.
everybody.
Since now all the super hardcore rumors were starting to hit again today. Let's be sure and see if these showed up. So I am whispering, and it's not because my voice is a wreck the way it had been with some of the other ones. Oh, we don't have those. Okay, so
Exciting time for
pause that. Remove. The Peter King rumors were plentiful. They were bountiful today. And just to start them off, Tyree Wilson, the Texas Tech pass rusher, might be in competition with Alabama's Will Anderson for the top defensive prospect on Houston's draft board. And that could mean something if the Texans aren't quite as smitten with C.J. Stroud as Mock Draft World thinks. Needed Mock Draft World with a capital M and the capital D and the capital W. So I'm at the Cleveland Clinic, and the neighbors complained about me, so that's why I'm speaking quietly. As far as CJ Stroud not being the guy, I think that there are so many things that people assume. Like, remember, people assumed that because Josh McCown wanted to play a game of horse with CJ Stroud, that meant that CJ Stroud was 400% definitely going to Carolina, and it almost becomes a truth. Like, it just becomes a speculation, and people speculate so much that it becomes a truth. I think likewise, it's become almost a truth that, the Texans surely loved Bryce Young. That's their guy. So if they can't have Bryce Young, A, they're idiots for not losing their last game, and B, they're idiots for not trading up to get Bryce Young, because don't you know they love Bryce Young, and C, but if they can't get Bryce Young, then they'll take CJ Stroud. Now, that's all good and fine to speculate and to wonder about that, but it becomes such the standard speculation that it's like a huge shock if CJ Stroud doesn't even, meet their standards. But we also don't know if they even like how excited they were about Bryce Young. The big question for me will be, okay, if Peter King is correct, he says that this might not this might sound crazy, but I'm not sure how many teams will be aggressive in trying to move up for CJ Stroud if Bryce Young goes first to Carolina. So somebody asked earlier why. Let me get that the football whisper. Somebody asked earlier why CJ Stroud's stock has seemingly fallen, and we don't know if it's fallen or not, but it seems like it's fallen a little bit. There's that S2 test, which I'm going to be honest, I assumed the Texans would use this S2 cognition test because a lot of the league is using it. Nick in this press conference acted like they don't use it and he barely knows anything about it, which is a surprise to a lot of us because San Francisco supposedly likes this S2 cognition test a lot. Brock Purdy scored very high on the S2 cognition test. So, I mean, that's one possibility. Has his stock actually fallen, or is it just that all this S2 conversation is out there and it makes it seem like it's falling? I know some of the things that Peter King is saying about talking to people in Houston about how the Texans might like Tyree Wilson as much as Will Anderson or more. I have a pretty good feel, I think, for where that's coming from, and it's based on a lot of things I agree with, and a lot of things I agree with, but we don't know for sure. Nobody knows for sure. I don't think if somebody in the Texans gave anybody in the media their actual draft board and who they prefer and everything, there should be an investigation. We should be going after these people. We should have whichever investigative journalists remain in America today. There's probably like 3 of them, and get on this. But it's a whole lot of speculation. But I think that the Texans, maybe by design or by happenstance, they've kind of primed the pump for not necessarily the same amount of shock or outrage if the Texans trade back or if they don't draft a quarterback. What I would hope is that it's for football reasons and not for agent reasons, because David Mulligetta, who is Deshaun Watson's agent, also represents CJ Stroud. I think a lot of people think that it's just, it's kind of cockamamie to think that somebody wouldn't deal with a player because of his agent. I personally do too. You just hope that your team isn't going to be the cockamamie one. So it just does happen. Cockamamie things happen. Let's see. Purdy might be another Steve Young. I don't think he's Mormon. That'd be Zach Wilson. But as far as I don't think he's not as athletic as Steve Young. And I know you're not saying that a direct comparison, but it is an interesting comparison. But he is smart enough about scrambling and like finding guys downfield as he's scrambling. Something that Steve Smith brought up about Bryce Young that I was surprised, and I'd played this a couple videos before, because Steve Smith is really a huge Bryce Young fan, but he pointed out that Bryce Young, when he scrambles, drops his eyes, takes his eyes off of downfield, and then he looks up and he finds the guys, and that's not uncommon. It's just that like Bryce Young is so smart and has such a good football IQ that part makes me a little bit nervous because he's athletic, but he's not NFL athletic. He's not Kyler Murray. It's one thing that I'm surprised isn't brought up more often. It's that, okay, Kyler Murray is 5'10", and look, Kyler Murray doesn't have that same football savvy that Bryce Young does, but he is a lot faster. So like one of the things that offset Kyler Murray's height was the fact that he's so fast and athletic, where Bryce Young doesn't have that. So whether it's running behind the line of scrimmage or running for positive yardage, he does have to make up for it that much more with his brain. Let's see. With Buda Baker joining Jalen Ramsey and Deshaun. Oh, that's right. Wait, is Buda Baker, is he represented by Mulligetta too? None your business? I like none your business just because he's got just lends more evidence to stay TF away from Stroud. The only thing about the Buda Baker thing too is that it seems like people are jumping off the Arizona Cardinals ship like rats off of a burning boat. Why don't they just trade with the Panthers and get Bryce? Just basically because the Panthers presumably really like Bryce Young or CJ Stroud, or just the idea of drafting number 1 overall. Like remember the Panthers are the team that traded aggressively for Sam Darnold, Baker Mayfield. Like the Panthers are in lust for a quarterback, and sometimes people make desperate moves when they're in that situation. I don't think they want to trade back would be the simple answer. If all of a sudden they realize like, we'll take anybody, then so be it. I don't think that's where they are. I think they traded up specifically because they're going to get a quarterback. Dave Tepper's he's got to be in his 60s, right? But he seems peppy. He's a little bit like Steve Ballmer, like a subdued Steve Ballmer. Like if you put Steve Ballmer on Quaaludes, which is still pretty amped up, but not quite so loud. If Carolina would trade, you would think it is because they feel the Texans wouldn't get their guy, in which case the Texans should not trade. Yeah, exactly. I know it's kind of a game of Russian roulette and trying to figure out who's more incompetent, right? You're just banking on the other person to make the wrong decision. Nick is the most famous GM now. I'm going to try to do something here. I want to play a little bit of, if I can get Rich Eisen. I'm hypersensitive now to any kind of perceived slight by some of these national guys. And let's see. And Rich Eisen, I didn't appreciate the tone he took at the beginning of this segment. Let's see, Rich Eisen on the growing intrigue. Let's share this. Okay, and then we'll see.
I haven't heard that Nick Caserio is on a hot seat, but I guess that's been the talk down there in Houston. Because he, in his press conference today, started it with a soliloquy on that very subject matter, and even dropped a nice pop culture reference in there too.
Oh, here he goes. Let me see if I can get this. Yeah, we'll do whatever.
Check it out.
Before we take any questions, quite frankly, I'm almost embarrassed that I have to say anything. Honestly, I feel like Leonardo DiCaprio in The Wolf of Wall Street, but I'm not leaving. There's never really been any substantive discussions of the sort. Unfortunately, I think this time of year, there's a lot of information and a lot of topics that are discussed. Some are more accurate than others, and I think it transcends multiple landscapes. But I can't. I'm honestly, I'm almost embarrassed that I have to say anything, but I feel like I have an obligation to to make that statement. Really try to stay ahead of it. I don't think there's anything else to talk about or to say or any question about it.
Well, he came out and he just wanted to put that to rest.
There you go.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so then what about?
Okay, so Rich is pointing out that, hey, I wasn't even aware of this because Houston's just a little backwater franchise. And even though this was in Pro Football Talk and all that other stuff, Rich Eisen wasn't aware of it. But now he's put that to rest.
About the trading the 2nd overall pick. Could you do that?
We'll do whatever the hell we want to do,
We've
Rich.
received some calls, actually, on the number 2 pick. So I think our job and responsibility is to listen, not rule anything out. And I think whatever the end result is, come Thursday, we'll be prepared to go either way. So if you want to quote me, are we open for business? I'd say we're open to listening. So if you want to change the vocabulary this year a little bit, but we have received a few calls. And again, I think our responsibility is to listen, to try to take the information in and then just make the right decision.
There you have it. I'm assuming it's Will Anderson. I don't know. Jalen Carter is making visits all over the top 10 market.
Okay, that's what he had said that caught my ear. Like, okay, I'd be really surprised if it's Jalen Carter.
And if you think he's a game changer and you think he's going to be fine off the field, then you go and take that kid.
Why does he go with Jalen Carter? Well, does he not know who Tyree Wilson is?
Everybody had him above Will Anderson on their draft boards before all that craziness happened in Georgia.
Right.
And then he had to leave the combine. But that could just be the agent saying, and Drew Rosenhaus, we're only visiting top 10 teams. So if you think he's going to fall out of the top 10, good luck to you. We're only visiting top 10 teams. It's about controlling the narrative, which again Nick Caserio just did in his first comments in a press conference today about the draft. I ain't leaving.
Yeah.
I appreciate him cleaning it up. The real transcript from Wolf of Wall Street, different, but agents will do that sort of thing to set the narrative. Bryce Young just did it today.
What did he do today?
Tom Pelissero
I was in my physical.
reporting that he's canceling the rest of his pre-draft visits.
Oh, that. Okay.
I visited the Panthers. I visited the Texans. That's all I need to do. I don't know who he's telling. I ain't coming.
Yeah. So, there we go. Forget that. There we go. I'm on a one-screen deal here. We have had no more noise complaints since I shifted over to the bed at the Intercontinental Hotel at the Cleveland Clinic in Cleveland, Ohio. I think Tyree Wilson very much could be, as I've been saying for a couple of weeks now, it feels like Tyree Wilson would be more of a D'Amico Ryans guy than Will Anderson. Not that he would dislike either of those guys. And it's not even necessarily as much about scheme. It's that Tyree Wilson has a lot of qualities that make him NFL ready right now. I'm just nervous about, I'm nervous a little bit about his injured foot because he's kind of stiff. So I guess the comparison I always try to make, which is a dumb comparison to make whenever I see a stiff edge rusher. I'm like, Reggie White. Was Reggie White, think about Reggie White, especially as he got older. Like, he was a stiff dude, and it didn't matter because he was just so physically dominating. But he was kind of stiff. He didn't have to bend because he was so good at just removing the person from the earth that was in his way. So that is a little bit of a knock on him, but I would say honestly, I feel like Will's a little bit stiff too for how he's advertised. He's not the same type of extreme athlete that I was expecting when I first started hearing about him. But the other thing that Peter King said that was interesting involving injuries and involving the Texans was that talking about Jackson Smith and Jigba, had a hamstring injury last year. He had a gigantic 2021 season at Ohio State. Then he played only 60 snaps in 2022. And I'm hearing some reticence about taking a guy 12th or 18th in the first round when in a 4.5-month season, he managed to play the equivalent of one football game with a hamstring injury. Yeah, I don't know, because I think I was under the impression that a lot of that might have just been him preserving his draft status. And I think where teams are with that kind of stuff now, remember, Nick Bosa did the same thing. Nick Bosa, his last year probably could have come back, but he chose to, was it either have the surgery or just recover from that core muscle injury he had? So they don't use it as a check against you, but in my mind, remember Myles Garrett? Myles Garrett played in the Texas Bowl with a sprained ankle when he had no reason to do so. He's going to be the number 1 overall pick or a top 3 pick regardless. He did it because he wanted to be with the team. I felt like for Myles Garrett, I don't think it would have mattered one way or the other, but he's a good example of okay, remember people were putting flack out about how he might care too much about dinosaurs or he had interests outside of football and people hate that. That impressed me. I felt like, okay, this guy's playing when he doesn't need to play. Christian McCaffrey bailed on his bowl game. I mean, a lot of guys bail on bowl games now, so I don't think the injury is as much an issue. Maybe it is, though. I mean, the hamstring, if it genuinely was a hamstring and not him just being really careful with his draft status, then that's a red light or a red flag, obviously. Bryce not a good fit in the Panthers offense. Boy, I'll tell you one thing, man. I think one thing I've heard over and over again, more and more these days, is that you adapt your offense to your quarterback. And I think that's really ever since the college game really started infiltrating the NFL, and a lot of the old school NFL guys realized, all right, we talk very reverentially of the NFL and what you can and can't do in the NFL. And they realized over time, especially after you get the snot beat out of you by some of these kids, that all right, we got to change our ways. So I don't know. I think the whole Frank Reich only coaches guys who are 6'3" or taller. Um, the big point about that is that Frank Reich has not chosen those quarterbacks. He's been an assistant coach other than bringing in Carson Wentz and Phillip Rivers, maybe. Like those are the guys he had control over. He has talked about how he doesn't have experience coaching those guys, or at least, Peter King brought this up, that he doesn't have experience coaching those guys. So he wants to learn and figure out what the challenges are. And that might be where some of the flack coming out of Carolina is about them not wanting him. But I just don't buy it completely. Carter just drove a car fast and probably eats a lot of junk. That's about it. Talking about Jalen Carter. I always mess his last name up. Yeah, I think, but and that's funny because it's like, I don't want to speak flippantly about this because it was a tragedy, or the two other people in the other car died. But as far as his actual behavior, that's what it seems like. People are just concerned about maturity in general. They're not worried that he's a bad guy. They're worried that he might just not be, like the various anonymous scouts or what have you, will question his practice habits and things like that. Sometimes I get frustrated because I'll see people, I think sometimes people hear bad practice habits and then they start questioning somebody's motor, and they're not one and the same. There are a lot of guys that play with a really good motor, and I think Jalen does play with a really good motor. But to take it to that next level, obviously, and to really get the most out of your ability, you got to become that JJ Watt, Aaron Donald type of worker. So I think what I've always felt is, if a guy's got maturity issues, but he plays his ass off and plays hard on the field. And I've seen Jalen Carter in the fourth quarter of games when he's gassed, like still running downfield, making plays in pursuit. Like there's something to him, like there's something there versus a guy that's just a turd on the field and maybe just gears up for 10 plays a game and gets a couple sacks. He's not that guy. So I think there is something to him. I'm for Tyree, but talent evaluators will have Will A at the top of the board almost universally. I disagree from things that I've read and people I've talked to. Maybe majority, but universally, I disagree. There's been quite a bit out there about some people liking Tyree Wilson more than Will Anderson. And some of that does come down to, what do you want to do with them? If you're in a team that has a Sam linebacker that can be a pass rusher, but also a Sam backer, then that's good. If you're a defensive coordinator that wants a classic, like Myles Garrett sized and type of defensive end, then that might be it. 4-3-3-4, it doesn't matter as much as it used to, but it still matters, and it matters to some people more. Panthers probably leaked bad crap about Stroud, who love part of the smoke screen. Anything's possible at this point, my friends. Bryce is a good fit in Carolina. Let's see. Oh boy, you guys have been commenting a lot. I apologize. All right. So, Sean, this is a good question because this came up in the press conference. If the S2 score is the reason the Texans aren't down with Stroud, what if the top QBs next year also score low? They're passing on them too. What happened to watching the tape? Right. Okay. So in the press conference, Caserio basically said that they don't use the S2 and he doesn't know much about it, unless I misheard that. But I think that he's not the kind to just, he can talk a circle around something he doesn't want to talk about. So I don't think the S2 is it with Stroud. If it comes to the football side of things, some people say that he's not a fast processor the way that Bryce Young is. I don't know if it's that as much as that if things aren't going as planned, It's not just his ability to, because remember, his ability to scramble was in question. And then he scrambled like crazy in a good way in the Georgia game. But that if he gets off schedule and if the play kind of breaks down, that he doesn't respond to it as well. And that some of these, some of the pressure stats, it's funny, some of the advanced pressure stats show that he was okay under pressure. Other ones will show that he kind of just fell apart under pressure. And I think it comes down to what types of pressures. So he did, in the comparison some people have made is a Dak Prescott, who, when things break down with Dak, that's when when the play breaks down, or things aren't quite as pristine as you would hope, then that's when he makes these really bad errors. And Dak Prescott's still a good quarterback. It's just that's one of the questions about him. I'm with you. I think right now a lot of the negatives that are coming out about Stroud, it's not like they're scandalous negatives or anything. I am surprised that, and I don't know, maybe if this is representation or what have you, I don't know. It's just the ugly part of the draft. Ethan Matt said Carter had character concerns before that incident. Again, comes down to verbiage, I guess. I like when I hear character, there's a difference between character issues and maturity issues. Character issues I always kind of classify as crimes against humanity, whereas maturity issues I consider like crimes against yourself. Like you don't take care of your body, you don't take care of your schoolwork, you don't take care of your responsibilities, versus character issues. I kind of think like, okay, this guy's a bad dude. Like, did he punch his girlfriend? Did he steal? Did he do something like that? And there haven't been, as far as I'm aware, of any stories like that about Jalen Carter. It's been more either immature or irresponsible or whatever, which is an issue. But there's issues that can make a guy unavailable to you legally, or that can turn a locker room around or split a locker room, or can just be like, man, they're just a bad dude. I haven't heard anything about like that about Jalen Carter. So, Rob, to answer your question, I'm doing a 3-day physical or to your theory about me. I'm in a 3-day physical that the NFL does for retired players. And so I'm at the Cleveland Clinic, and I'm staying at a hotel at the Cleveland Clinic. When we were streaming earlier, I got complaints from the neighbors, and I'm especially trying to be careful because a lot of the people in here are pretty sick in this hotel. So I'm trying to be a good neighbor. I don't want let's see. I may have a baby sleeping somewhere. Well, no. Any unaccounted for children that I would have, which is very, very unlikely. I didn't lead the lifestyle that I probably should have led, but they would have to be at least like 22 years old. So I might have an unknown grandchild sleeping somewhere. Let's see, y'all Houston fans, mad y'all not getting Bryce. Who the hell are you? Shot by Dre the activist. You get the hell out of my live stream. You non-Texans fan. yeah. I'm mad with CJ. Okay, so the other question is, let's see. I want to see if I'd rather take Miles Murphy or Kalijah Cansey at 12 and still take our QB. Okay. Miles Murphy, I'm intrigued by Miles Murphy. He does some really good things, man. He's one of these guys, kind of like Will Anderson. Like there's a certain athleticism to being able to keep your feet, and it's like a combination of strength and balance that's kind of freakish. Like who has this is Aaron. Oh geez. No, it's probably time. This is when I'm getting woozy from the long day. Aaron Donald, my God. Aaron Donald has like this kind of freakish ability. Jason Pierre-Paul, to when people hit him, it almost just doesn't affect them. Like it might displace their body, but they never lose their balance. And Miles Murphy has a little bit of that going. I think the only time I noticed that he lost his feet was when one of his teammates rolled into the back of his knee in a game last year. So he's got a whole lot of natural ability and natural strength and power. Yet Will Anderson too. And so I like him. Kalijah Cansey, the thing I worry about with him is, look, he's not an Aaron Donald. He's small. I want to say he looks smaller than Ed Oliver, but he has much better technique than Ed Oliver did as a prospect. And it took Ed a couple years to really learn how to use his hands well and how to be an NFL defensive lineman despite all of his athleticism. Kalijah Cansey is very athletic, very quick, very explosive in like a John Randall type of way. But I see him get knocked around quite a bit. So I do get nervous about him, especially these days where you could say like, well, he's a situational pass rusher. Like, man, I don't know. You got to stop the run playing nickel a lot of times. So that's what makes me nervous about him. I'm going to be really intrigued by the team that takes him. I think it'll be somebody with a very, perhaps less of a physical mindset is what the Texans have. You know, D'Amico doesn't have this Leslie Frazier, Lovie Smith kind of old school Tampa 2 mentality, and their defenses have evolved since then, but they still don't care about the run as much. D'Amico, he wants to stop the run. So I don't know if Kalijah Cansey is the right fit. I really like him. Like I really, really like him. Like I'm going to pull for him because he's the classic guy that where you like, look at any of these other defensive linemen in the class, except for maybe Nolan Smith, and say like, all right, if you played with that kind of intensity and effort and everything else, man, it would be something else. Nolan already plays really, really fast. But like, it's something else. It's kind of like John Randall would be the better comparison. Let's see. You are really silly, bro. No matter what, we'll be fine with CJ if that's the way. Go to a Panthers forum, homeboy. Oh, okay. I thought you were talking to me. I was like, come on, man. Silly. Not me. Not silly in a bad way. Let's see. Yeah, Lance, the more time goes on, I think Lance Erline's prediction of Wilson and Levis. Did he say Levis? I knew about Wilson. Did he predict Levis, trade up for Levis, or draft him with 12 overall? Oh, now I got to check Lance's mock draft again. Yeah, because Lance has been on the Tyree Wilson thing for a couple weeks. I think Lance and I kind of philosophically had the same thing about Tyree, and then I think Lance may have backed it up more as well. But as far as philosophically, Lance and I for a while have thought the same thing about Tyree Wilson in this defense. But then Lance is very plugged in also in this scouting world, obviously. So, but we just can't. Somebody might know that Lance knows things, and then because they know Lance knows, then they go ahead and gotta be head on a swivel. I can't live in that world. I was telling John Harris and Lance, I've told both those guys before that. Hold on a second. Like, honestly, the more I get into every year, I watch a little bit more and try to predict a little bit more. It's such a crapshoot trying to figure out like which of these guys is going to develop, because every single one of them needs to fix something. And if they don't fix that one thing, like that's it. You suck. Like, you suck. It's just one thing. It's simple. It's easy. But that's tough. Let's see. Lance doesn't even talk about Levis anymore. LOL. Okay, so I don't know what Lance's current status is with Levis. Let's see. Okay, this is good. Oh, listen, Isaac is Lord 2020. I know nothing about you. I can't. Damn you! I know nothing about you. I don't know who you are or where you came from. But now that's made some kind of a subliminal impression in my brain. I refuse to believe you. That's another Panthers. One of the based on my Alabama friends. Damn you, Isaac is Lord 2020. Let's see. Oh, is it the S2 test? Okay, I think they're talking about the S2 test, Brandon. I don't know if Okay. Let's see. Boy, you guys have a lot of comments here. Bryce is not a munchkin. He's so little, though. He's little, man. I remember one time in high school, I hit a quarterback who was like, he was like 6'1", 150 pounds or something, and it felt wrong. Like I hit him, and it felt wrong, but also almost like I didn't hurt him with the initial hit, because it'd be like trying to tackle a feather, like try to do damage to a feather. You can't. It just kind of just gives with you, and it doesn't go anywhere. Then I landed on him. That's when it was ugly. Let's see. Due to a bet I made, if we don't draft a QB at 2, I have to buy a Dallas Cowboy jersey. All right, let's see. Okay. Never have the 2 top QB prospects both worked out. Bryce will be good in the NFL. QB drafted NFL. It's been bad. Like the second quarterback taken, it's been weird. Like over the course of the last 15 years, the second quarterback taken has been a weird one. I'm going to share with you guys a really annoying tab here. Here we go. Let's do this little exercise. So none of your business said never have the 2 top QB prospects both worked out, but now like 1 in 3 has worked out, or 1 in 4 has worked out. But the top 2, if we call them the top 2, because like, all right, Trubisky went number 1 overall, obviously, but then, the next 2 after him, Mahomes and Watson, worked out, at least for a little while, right? So Trevor Lawrence, Zach Wilson, no. Joe Burrow, Tua Tagovailoa. We'll see if Tua's brain stays intact this season. Kyler Murray, Daniel Jones, jury's still out. Baker Mayfield, Sam Darnold, no. Mitchell Trubisky, Patrick Mahomes, 1 or 2. Jared Goff, Carson Wentz. By the way, I'm in Cleveland. Trubisky's from here, and I was talking to a guy today who was talking about how he was on a flight out of Cleveland, and Trubisky was on his flight, and he's like, it's weird, just nobody really knew him or anything. Like, it's just how quickly your star falls in the NFL. Jared Goff, Carson Wentz looked all right for a while, right? Almost. Jameis Winston, Marcus Mariota, Blake Bortles, Johnny Manziel, EJ Manuel, Geno Smith. That doesn't even count. Andrew Luck, Robert Griffin worked out for a little while. Terrell Pryor. Oh, that was the supplemental. Cam Newton, Jake Locker, Sam Bradford, Tim Tebow, Matt Stafford, Mark Sanchez, Stafford and Sanchez, maybe. Matt Ryan, Joe Flacco. There you go. In 2008, it worked out, none of your business. You've proven wrong by Flacco once again. Jamarcus Russell, Brady Quinn, Vince Young, Matt Leinart, Alex Smith, Aaron Rodgers. That worked out. So the early 2000s were better. I mean, it didn't work out for San Francisco, but Alex Smith was a viable NFL quarterback. Eli Manning, Phillip Rivers. What are you talking about? None of your business. David Carr, Joey Harrington, Mike Vick, Drew Brees. So it's not that it's never worked out. It's been, it's that, you know what it is, none of your business? We're due. That's what we're doing. Yeah, Manning and Rivers. Wentz was good until that injury. Poor Tua. I'm with you. All right. Oh, here, I'll show you this. I'm going to show you my, oh, okay. Let's see if I can show this. No, I won't be able to show that. I got my itinerary tomorrow. Okay, so the other Monday morning quarterback stuff. If I'm like you, I hear the Houston souring on Stroud stuff, and I just can't believe the Texans wouldn't take a quarterback high in this draft. How would Cal McNair answer to his disaffected season ticket holders if, after passing on a quarterback with the 3rd and 15th pick in the first round last year, well, come on, Peter King, he passes on a quarterback at number 2 this year? It's the job of coaches to get the best out of players. Certainly enough. Yeah. Okay. So wait a second now. All right. Passing on a quarterback last year is different than passing on a quarterback this year. How does he how do disaffected Texans, how do you, my disaffected Texans fans, feel about this? Have you come to grips with it, or are you just livid and besides yourself with rage? I'm I desperately need that if this happens, I almost really want CJ Stroud to go to the Titans or the Colts. Like, let's get it done with. Like, if the Texans don't take CJ Stroud, let's say they trade back, they're just out on him. I really, really want, I want the Texans to either be right or I want the Texans to be really wrong. And then that's it. Like, okay, Nick either did a really brilliant thing or he did a really bad thing, but then you've got clarity on it. If CJ Stroud, the problem is you can't really tell with a quarterback for a couple years at least. See, this is the thing, Ethan, passing on a quarterback here feels like they aren't even trying to improve. That's the question though. Like, what if you genuinely don't like these guys? Like, if you're a talent evaluator and you feel like you've got to do best by the team, what if you just genuinely don't like those guys? My fear is that, and I would say the same thing about Chris Ballard up in Indianapolis. I think sometimes you might think you're doing the responsible thing and you think you're doing the conservative thing and not taking a quarterback. I guess you could call that conservative. But like, is there a little bit of hubris involved there in that you think you can tell who is and who is not the good quarterback? At one point, a bunch of people thought that Trubisky was a better quarterback than Pat Mahomes. 10 teams decided not to draft a quarterback when Pat Mahomes was there. Some of them didn't need a quarterback, but like, that was Pat Mahomes. So what level is your hubris or overconfidence if you think like, I'll just pass on this guy? Like, I'll get Caleb next year. It's not that simple. So what I hope, as Cotton Club Studio says, I trust D'Amico's instincts being in the mix. Yeah, that's if they do pass on a quarterback at all, then I hope that it's because they know what they're doing. Wild Thing says the crop of quarterbacks is one deep. Even the best one, Bryce Young, has questions. Yeah, he needs that height, that femur lengthening surgery. All right, I'm going to get going. We haven't had any more noise complaints. Thank you guys for keeping it down and being quiet. None of your business says nothing like 3 out of 20 years, right? You know what you got to realize as far as the top 2 quarterbacks being good. But sometimes it's the second quarterback, the third quarterback. Like, if you want to look at different iterations, it's a small sample size, none of your business. I won't allow your talk of impossibilities coming in because it's a small sample size with quarterbacks. And if you do happen in that 1 year, this year you might be correct. But it's not sometime. If the next Manning and Rivers situation came along, would you say, I don't know about this Rivers fella. Can't take this Rivers guy. All right. I'm going to say goodnight, everybody. I've got a long day of getting probed tomorrow. And then after that, I've got my physical.